something else is happening as well. And I think that's what I want to share with you, how organizations are innovating differently, the kind of things that are driving it. And I'm going to put at the heart of this concept of values-driven innovation. So let me share my screen with you. I've got a few slides to share. And I hope that's, you can now start to see the slides. So thumbs up, Tom, if you can see my slide. That's clear? Okay. Yeah, let me just go back to that. It's also seems to be such an auspicious day, the 22nd of the 11th, 22, a palindromic date today. So I'm going to talk about this kind of values-driven approach because it's something that's become so evident because our students are demanding it. We have a world of technological innovation, which is right at its zenith right now. For many organizations, it's almost indigestible. But that technology, unless you take into account the human factor and creativity that connects it with society, it's very hard to see how those new technologies will create positive change or change which our planet desperately needs. But I'm going to look back just a moment in saying that the world that you've experienced as you have all grown up, because I know I'm talking to a group of people of a similar age for the most part, apart from a few very young ones on here, as myself, we've all grown up with a certain vision of the way the world looks from the 1950s and 60s to the present day. These are all designed by graduates who came from the Royal College of Art. The way the world looks in the world of fashion, from Burberry to the very latest designers, those who design the royal wedding dresses of so many princesses over the years, also come from the RCA. Whether you drive a Mini, a Ford Focus, a Bentley or an Aston Martin, almost certainly it will have been designed by a student that graduated from the RCA over the last 20, 30 years. And what we watch on TV and what we watch in the cinema and the way the world looks, again, has been driven so much by graduates and staff from the Royal College of Art. It puts a very, very heavy responsibility, of course, onto us as teachers, because we realize that the students we're teaching will be fashioning the world of 2030, 2040, 2050. The students that are with us right now, just as their predecessors did. Paul Priestman, who designed the train that you see on the left and the Heathrow Express, was one of the students that I was at college with. Margaret Calvert just preceded me, but every road sign in Britain follows her design style. And Thomas Heatherwick, who is renowned, I suppose, as one of our most important exports in the world of design, has designed everything all the way through to kind of London buses. And product designers from Olympic torches to people like James Dyson and others. And of course, you have to include the world of contemporary art, as you can see here, and architecture. So every aspect of the way we live our lives and the physical artifacts that are part of those, as well as many of the media that we use, has been delivered by graduates and designed by graduates of the Royal College. Now, the world, as I say, has changed a bit again. I mentioned all of those technological transformations that have taken place, and so we've had to change as an institution. And the way we've changed is to create, over the last decade, a series of new research centers. And they have followed a path that was set by our Center for Inclusive Design that was formed 30 years ago, the Helen Hamlin Center. But as you can see here, Helix is about health and well-being, a joint research center with St. Mary's. Intelligent mobility is our work with on autonomous vehicles, as well as on robotics that you see separately, as well as drones, which are part of our intelligent mobility. Our Material Science Research Center is also part of our work on circularity as part of it, and it goes all the way through to working with algae to make yarn for carbon negative clothes, all the way through to growing bacteria that you can create polymers from and die cast injection molding as plastics, which will completely biodegrade. Left in the soil, they will disappear and just turn back into bacteria again. And so you can see that we are right on the very cusp, and I'll show you some of that work, but the cusp of bringing together not only new technologies with design to find a way of using them, but actually the two working hand in hand to discover and create wholly new opportunities that are first to the world as well. One of those centers, and I'll just run through just a few of them, the Design Age Institute is working for the government. It is the UK Design Age Institute, and it is working on how we create a world that is more conducive to making life not only bearable, but rich and fulfilling for people of any age. So as we age, and the aging population of the UK and elsewhere in the world is very evident, then we need to make sure that we design for people of all ages, not just one. Our work on intelligent mobility is looking at new forms of transportation, because the car of the future may not be a car you own, it may be a service, it might be a mobility service instead of a car that sits in the parked up for 96% of its time. And so again, the way we think about vehicles and the way we think about autonomous vehicles is also going through a transformation. Let me just turn now to this kind of concept of values-driven innovation, because what we recognize is that the world is moving at such a pace towards what some may say is, frankly, a very dark place we may be going. We have these amazing technologies, and I list a few of them here. But, you know, I grew up in the 1970s in the world of computing, when computers went online for the first time. And in the 1980s, we had the PC, and I was lucky enough to work on IBM's very first PC, which kind of gave the seal of legitimacy to a whole industry around personal computing. The 1990s brought us the internet. And in the early 2000s, of course, we began to unplug, and many of you will be thinking, do you remember that moment when you could unplug your computer from a cable and could walk around with it? I mean, it seems ancient now that since we were doing that, but we were all tethered, and suddenly our phones became computers in our hands. But since 2010, many of the technologies that you see here have come of age and have started delivering social as well as economic impact. And some of them, we might say, are also creating cultural impact as part of them. But they come at a very important time. 2050, and we expect the world's population to be around 9.7 billion, is only about 6,100 working days away. It's very finite. You know, I would be 98 in 2050. So still a couple of years before getting a telegram from King William, probably. But, you know, 6,100 working days, it's not much time. We had 6,100 pounds to last us to next summer. We watch every £5 note we spent. Well, that's 5 working days, it's a week. If I put 6,000 dots, 60 dots by 100 dots on a wall, you can see them from across the room. So there's not much time. We have a perfect storm of technology, but we also have a perfect storm of issues that we've experienced through the pandemic, through the consequences of global instability, not just in climate change, but also politically as part of it, and all the stresses and strains that will come on our world as a result. And also it's very fitting as we have just completed COP27, perhaps rather disappointingly, in terms of the new targets we are aiming to reach. That means that we need to start thinking, and I know that the next generation of designers who shaped the world the way I described in those opening slides, they're wanting to shape the world now. They're looking for new models of how to innovate that places values values about what we need to do for our society, our world, whether at a global level or a hyper-local level. But they want to be seeing their work make an impact. They want to be designing with people, so it's much more participative, not just for them. And they recognize that it also has to be a much more integrated and interdisciplinary model, so that values-driven innovation, in effect, will exploit a knowledge of technology, but not led by technology, but enabled by it, and innovative new business models that enable people, planet, and nature to prosper. Now, there is a very strong argument that says the way companies are perceived by their future workforce and their clients is on the basis of their values and the choices we make. And therefore, companies that do not live by their values and do not demonstrate those values will neither attract the most talented people in a war for talent today, nor will they be able to satisfy their clients in the same way, because their clients are looking for companies that exhibit the diversity, inclusivity, good governance, environmental credentials, and their social credentials through how they operate their entire supply chain. And that is something that brings me to this concept of driven by values. And I want to talk about just a few of the projects that we are deeply involved in today. The first is the brainchild of His Royal Highness Prince Charles, now His Majesty King Charles, of course. But in 2021, he launched the Terra Carta, a Magna Carta for the planet. And with it, he also saw, and in a very visionary way, that industry would play an important role in being able to ensure that we could create a new model of prosperity that would be in harmony with people, planet, and nature. And he enrolled in that Sir Jony Ive, who has been for the last 30 years the chief designer from the early 90s at Apple, to create a Terra Carta Design Lab, and that is based at the Royal College of Art, and I happen to be the academic lead for it. And you can see its focus here, that along with the Sustainable Markets Initiative, which is spawned by Terra Carta, it is looking for a very significant shift in corporate strategies, a reformed global financial system, and an enabling environment that attracts investment and incentivizes action. And that was presented at Davos in 2021, at COP in 2022. More than 300 major global corporations have now signed up, and many of them have received as well an award as part of that. Now, in creating the lab, what they wanted to do was to demonstrate fresh ways of thinking and new ideas that brought together this new model of innovation. Values-driven, creating value for people, planet, and nature. And it is very, very interdisciplinary. So I thought I would show you a couple of these examples. This is one of the winners. It's called ZELP. The young man, Francisco Norris, who is showing it to the king, is from Argentina. His family have 30,000 cattle. He knows a lot about cattle. His brother is a chemist as well. He studied at the Royal College of Art. Now, what is interesting is that cattle burp. Most of the methane they burp comes from the front end. They don't produce much methane from the back end, but the amount of methane they produce is the equivalent in greenhouse gas output of all the planes in our skies. 1.6 billion cattle on the planet and only likely to grow more. So this device, of which you see a model here, is now already in production, and it is now on several thousand cows as part of, or cattle, as part of the first prototyping, not a few hundred, not tens, but several thousand. The methane gas is captured by the device. It's turned into carbon dioxide, which is 84 times less virulent as a greenhouse gas. And the process produces energy. That energy powers the device, and the device will check the animal's welfare, where it eats, how often it stands up, sits down, all the rest of it. Now, it's not enough to be have an understanding of chemistry, of animal husbandry as part of it, and welfare, and also kind of data analytics and big data. It also needs a sustainable business model to go with it as well. And as a result of this business model, it has attracted several £million of investment and great interest from many of the major meat providers, because the carbon credits that are generated from ZELP for the farmer means the farmer is actually paid to put these on their cattle. They don't have to charge more for their beef. They're being paid because the amount of carbon credits by the reduction in the greenhouse gas will pay for the devices themselves. So companies who would otherwise have to do offsets for mythical forests, fantasy forests somewhere that will grow in 80 years and mature, can instead see direct savings through the application of this and measurable impact on the reduction of greenhouse gases. So it brings together all of these different disciplines for value. Let me just kind of show you just some of the other ones, which I hope this video will share.
The Terra Carta Design Lab is a call to action to save the planet through the creative insights of design.
Looking at the problem in a curiously different way can make a whole range of solutions immediately clear.
It's always seemed to me so valuable to learn from nature in terms of creating the right circular bioeconomy.
Today, you're meeting 20 talented finalists. The next really difficult bit is to take it down to 4 final winners.
The journey has been very rewarding, and we're really excited to advance this climate solution with the endorsement and the support of Terra Carta.
I can't even imagine how much they'll help us, but to have such achieved people to guide us will be very exciting.
Terra Carta Design Lab opportunity is perfect for us.
It's been amazing. I'm so excited to start the work.
So a quick sense of how the Terra Carta has helped those 20 finalists, which eventually was reduced down to 4 in total. And those 4 have collectively raised more than £15 million of investment now behind them. So you can start to see that what we do in terms of our innovation model is not just come up with great ideas, but also look to see how we can translate those ideas into new business ventures that can attract investment and make a direct impact. I talked about ZELP a moment ago. Another one is collecting the dust, the carbon dust from tires on London's buses and other heavy vehicles through electrostatic charge, because the new vehicles in our world are certainly going to be polluting. Even if they have electrical power chains, they're going to be polluting our planet by the particles which will be breathed in cities from brakes and tires. And again, the Tire Collective, again, won the Dyson Award in 2021, and another winner here. Amphitex has created a breathable material, which is unlike if you have a Patagonia or North Face jacket that is water repellent. It is water repellent because of the laminates or the chemicals that are used on it. This is a completely natural, chemical coating free, which means it can be used in many different forms in many different ways and recycled right down to the level of the yarn, which is a tremendous impact as we start to look at different types of clothes. And again, this has come out of our students who graduated from the RCA a couple of years ago. Another example which shows values and values driven is a project called Design for Good, initiated by McKinsey in partnership with Google and Nike and the Royal College of Art. I was the representative from the Royal College. Its vision was to work with the United Nations and agree that those companies that would support it would dedicate 1 week of their creative designers at full pay of their employment on a project for Design for Good. Well, we took it to the designers who said, we need more than a week. We want to have real amounts of time over 9 months. And so all of the companies that you see here have pledged and now have 700 designers working all over the world in 160 teams to address the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is about water and sanitation. And this year, we will be presenting the output of that at the General Assembly in the UN in March. Our partners in it, you can see the from Ben Shepherd is from McKinsey, Sandy Spiker is the managing director of one of the world's largest design companies, IDEO. John Mader was the head of the Rhode Island School of Design and now is head of AI at Microsoft. And Gilbert Ongbo is the president for the UN of Agriculture. And his role at the UN includes leadership for Sustainable Development Goal 6. And so our focus is on water and sanitation this year. It is a 2-year exercise. The work will be presented first at the UN, and then it will be concluded with their input. And in June next year, we'll be selecting from those 160 teams all of the output which is open sourced and engaging with the development organizations that have been part of it to see many of those innovations taken into production. And that will be celebrated in June of next year. The final project I want to just talk to you about, which is changing the shape of innovation, is the Open Innovation Fellowship, which we do with the Mayor of London's office. And it is inviting large corporations to engage with the UK's ecosystem of small, innovative startups, scale-ups, and other exciting new businesses who have the capacity to help those organizations transform how they innovate and what they innovate. And we are deeply involved in that. Here are 40 of the companies that we're working with as part of the 60. And you can see big names from Boeing and McDonald's to Fidelity, the London Fire Brigade, the Crown Estates. So it's a very broad group of companies. And right now, this is the latest cohort, and they participate in a 4-month-long program where we're looking at new models of open innovation and helping them achieve those and scale that inside their organizations. And it is this new model that I really want to share with you in terms of when I talk about innovating how we innovate, it is very much in that space. It takes the normal model of open innovation, but extends it by focusing on 2 other aspects, not just coming up with ideas from outside the organization, but thinking very carefully about how you disseminate and build the capacity inside your organization to exploit those. Similarly, how do you absorb those into the front line of the organization so that everyone pulls together? That's the core of Open Innovation 1.0. But what we've done is to look at some of the issues. How do the ideas from outside align with your business strategy? How do they really address customers' compelling needs? Because often open innovation will produce hundreds of bright ideas, but how do you select? How do you transform your whole business if it might be quite different? How does that change your business model? How can I execute at speed? So it's not enough in itself just to have this kind of open innovation model, because these are classical areas where the problem of unless you were able to resolve these problems, you cannot reach a successful outcome. It does not scale. So what we've done is work with these organizations to create a new model of open innovation, which adds in the kind of creative design approach, design thinking, but allied with data science, so that you can really align around customers' clear and compelling needs and check and ascertain whether that truly aligns with the business strategy. Otherwise, the frontline teams will never be part of it. It also allows you to look at new models of design with customers through co-design methods, the way that design works in terms of rapid prototyping and testing, blending big data with nuanced data, and really working on compelling challenges. The second part is to say, how do I combine it with business model innovation and lean startup methods, which take lean, but combine it with all of the things that we've learned about how you scale and accelerate businesses, even inside a large corporation, to be able to be more successful. Lean startup means that you're able to reduce risk by ensuring that your customers are not only involved in the process, but that you don't start the major investment until the customer's ready to purchase. They want to place orders with you. It combines service innovation with business model innovation, so that, and a simple example, if Airbnb had not come up with this business model at the same time they designed the customer experience, they wouldn't have been able to produce a service which has made such an impact. Similarly, would Marriott have ever been able to come up with such an innovative model? Probably not, because they would be constrained by their own business model. So the kind of combination between startup and business model is right at the very heart of this process. And again, we've been working with major corporations on now taking this out for them. This is an example from Telefonica, who is building a $1 billion business in healthcare, and well on track to being able to do that, focusing on how they use artificial intelligence to improve people's health. And using this approach, we've helped them move from 92 different concepts into 4 live services, which are now out in the marketplace, completely new, developed, and helping them using this new model. So, in summary, what is a values-driven innovation model? Well, our world is getting hotter, it's getting dirtier, it's getting a little more diseased, it's certainly much more crowded, it's more conflicted than ever before. And we know that if we are going to innovate and put things that are new to the world, they need to make the world better at a global level as well as at a hyper-local level. That means that innovation needs to be driven by values first, and then value creation can come, as you saw in those examples. It needs to be purposeful, creating prosperity and harmony with people, planet, and nature. It needs to be far more open, interdisciplinary, and using the imagination that comes with design, but informed by data. It needs to be participative, designing not just with, but also for, designing with, not just for people. And it requires us to innovate how we innovate. And coming back to my comment before, the world is 6,100 days, and it may not have that before it reaches tipping points, where the best we can do is to create a soft mattress for it to land on because we're too late. Well, there's 6,100 days, and I want to make sure that the next generation is inspired with new models of innovation, and the industry will accept those models and encourage to do so because they see it's a very good prospects of business growth and achievement. So I'll stop there. I think that's the allotted time, and be very happy to take any of your questions or elaborate on any more of the points that I've raised today. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Nick. That was very, very thought-provoking, I have to say. It's fascinating, the huge diversity of the number of companies and ideas entrenched in that. And if the UK is going to do anything at all to survive as a competitive economy, it has to absorb that through all of its citizens. So I'm going to shut up now and ask a question from other people, please. Yeah. John?
Yeah, Nick, as usual, you make me want to become a student again, do all this exciting stuff. And as you probably know, I've been involved with open innovation for the last 20 years or so, and open data. And I've been disappointed. I've not been able to embed it in universities I've talked to. You can do it in the Royal College of Art, but how can we get it into other places of learning? Because I think my friends know I did a single honours degree in metallurgy, and I was just told in the faculty of metallurgy, there are no options. This is what you're going to learn. And so I know all about slag theory, a lot of other useful stuff. But it's really a question of how this gets into other courses, because if it's a select few, that's great, but it's actually trying to get this out and about much more openly and usefully. And I've argued with the university I'm with now that maybe once every year they have a week doing this all together, cross disciplines, and actually the university is starting to think radically about it.
Well, look, you raise an very important point. I mean, I often have characterized the universities as being not great continents of knowledge where you can roam between them, but archipelagos of knowledge, where there are a few bridges or ferries that allow you to go from island to island in the archipelago. And of course, if you are going to become the big beast on your island, that has been a route to publishing in journals, which tend to be very, very focused on individual silos. So there are some systemic challenges that exist within institutions like that. However, let me just turn to the reasons for optimism. And they're the following. The first is that, today I'm involved with London Business School, John, with your help at Liverpool Hope as well. And it's been a pleasure to engage there. And I see students coming from many different courses now, which do have strong interdisciplinary components to them. So whilst we're pioneering for our own students, a kind of cross-disciplinary focus. So if you're studying design, we expect you to study big data, data analytics. We expect you to be able to come to grips with digital transformation. We expect you to understand business models as part of it. That kind of thinking is happening elsewhere, isn't it, now in my experience? And thanks, I would say, also to the 1851, who supported our work on the empathetic engineer, a website for young engineering students to learn about design and other disciplines. I'm going to be taking some of our other interdisciplinary programs and making all of those freely available and accessible. So I think there is a move now, John, I would say, but and it's being driven by the demand of the students and demand from the industry that will employ the students when they emerge as graduates from it. So I see it happening at Imperial. I see London Business School nudging towards it. I think I'm pushing at an open door at Liverpool Hope. And the graduates that come forward to get awards for their postgraduate studies, to do their PhDs, increasingly seem to have interdisciplinary credentials. I just think we in academia need to do a little bit of catching up with them. And hopefully those systemic, there'll be another generation that comes along soon.
It's true, as you know, I've been connected with Liverpool Hope. It is universities like that where it seems to be easier to get this sort of thing going. But also I'm involved with a group at Cambridge now, which is led by another, not my wife, another Alison Wood,
Yes.
called Changemakers. And
Yes.
she's got 60 students at Homerton College. You know about her, do you?
Yes,
it's worth getting together all these groups, I think. I just
Yeah.
wonder whether it's worth getting all these groups together to get enough thrust, like a scrum pushing forward.
That's a jolly good idea. I think, you know, the idea of us getting the ball over the line by forming a scrum and, or at least a very big ruck. It takes a lot of organization to get a scrum, but let's start with a ruck.
Well, Alison was at the Warner Lecture this year, so maybe we can get her involved with you to get the movement going.
I think so. That would be great. Mark, you've got your hand up, I think.
Oh, Nick, thank you very much. I teach engineering at Birmingham City and Birmingham City University. Well, I don't teach engineering. I'm not an engineer, but I teach engineers, and I teach them. I hope that their job is to be creative problem solvers. My concern is that universities are getting too obsessed with key performance indicators and metrics, and those things actually inhibit creativity because they're more concerned with how their funding will be affected by jobs, employability, and things like that. And I think there is a creative tension, but I think the economic pressures at the moment are putting many universities, especially BCU, for instance, in a very, very difficult place. And I'm privileged to do this, and my boss is a massive risk taker employing me, as Alan Hughes will probably laugh at. But it's just very, very tricky. It's great fun, but where do you think the future will be with this conflict universities have?
Look, I think it is very real, but again, going back to the REF, what is clear for the research excellence framework, which universities are so immensely focused on, there is now going to be two other frameworks: the knowledge exchange framework, how people work with industry, and the teaching excellence framework, which is about how the students and the office of students looks at how well not only are they teaching the discipline, but how people are being prepared for industry. So I do think there are forces at work which will move us on from this kind of archipelago. I'm not a long-term academic. I came and did my PhD 17 years ago at Imperial after a 30-year career, 31 years working for IBM. I wish I had used one of the 1851 awards to have got a PhD much earlier in my career whilst I was in the R&D side. But my experience of academia was that there was nothing less collegiate than a college. That there was much less interdisciplinary, and even within individual departments, there was people could do things on their own, which in industry you could never do. You rely on everyone else. So I think there is a recognition outside of the universities with these new frameworks to drive people towards those goals. And one of the best ways of doing it that I've seen, and it also relates to the work, for instance, at CERN that John and I have been involved with. If you set a big challenge to a group of people from different disciplines and you put them together to try and address that challenge, what they do is they bring a different lens to that challenge and are more likely to produce breakthrough innovation. And as universities focus increasingly on impact as well as on, and that becomes part of it, I think that those kinds of indicators on impact will force that kind of change. So, I smile a lot because I just believe that we're facing incredibly difficult challenges, but I'm just exposed to groups of students at the institutions I've worked with that fill me full of hope. That they are able to create change, and they are so values driven. My generation was value driven. We understood about creating value and capturing value, but they are values driven first. And that I think is hugely important, not just being knowledge driven for its own sake, but being value driven, which was my generation and also my children's, I think. But now it's values driven, and I think that is a good indicator.
Thank you, Nick.
I don't know if it's a good debate. We've got to get the universities to kind of shift on a bit, and the employers as well. you know, Tom and others. I mean, you know, we've got to get that focus. It's not just about what job you're going to get. You know, I think universities mustn't just also produce people who will, you know, the jobs of tomorrow aren't understood. The way the world is going to look tomorrow is not well understood. We need people who are agile, they are curious, and they're systems thinkers. And coming back to creativity, it's not just creative problem solving. Great innovation, particularly in science as well as the arts, comes from creative problem identification. You know, the next physics we'll be looking at is because people have asked a fresh question, the question nobody ever asked before. And that's what artists do. And that, coming back to Tom's comment of bringing the arts together with sciences, we need people who are curious and are ready to ask questions that no one's ever asked before. And the university should be doing that. And if they're not, then the students should be, and we train them to be. And then I think things will happen.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, David. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to agree with everything you've just been saying. In my experience, which is by no means as extensive as anybody else's on this, everybody else is on this screen print I can see, stems from my involvement with a charity called the Noon Foundation and our support for the University of East London Business School, where we set up a project encouraging groups of students from different backgrounds, different levels of study. Some were MBA, some were first-year undergraduates, and so on. And they'd work on projects together. They'd come from Asia, they'd come from China, Africa, they came from America, and they come from the UK. And their work output was phenomenal. Each one of them contributed to the particular project they chose to research in a different way, and they brought their own nuance and their own thought processes, which really enhanced the final product. And this is where this word diversity, which I've heard several times this evening, has a major part to play, because in that environment, they were all encouraged to contribute what they could and what they thought. That's all I can say.
David, I think you make really, really important points there as well. And I think that you know, the more cross-institutional programs you can create. We have a project called the Grand Challenge at the RCA, and UNESCO are now getting involved with on resilience, how to create resilience at a national and at the level of the communities. Now, it's focused this year on oceans and people who are at the edge of the ocean and the ocean economy right now. And we have students with MBAs, we have students with computing backgrounds, designers, all working on these kinds of projects. And the more we can, I think, challenge groups of students to work together, giving them a scope rather than a specific brief. We want you to explore this and come up with a brief. The more fresh ideas will emerge, and we just got to make sure not only do they emerge, but they can potentially be impactful. And it's so interesting to hear, you know, that this is happening in your institutions as well, and the University of East London.
Thank you. I think Mike would like to come in. Mike, go ahead, please.
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed your talk, and I was very delighted to see that NHS was mentioned as one of the collaborators in one of the larger projects that you've been talking about. But I just wondered, in the context of Imperial RCA interactions, whether or not the medical school or the health service related components of Imperial were actually engaging in interactions with the RCA, from the fact that really, if we're going to see significant change within as complex an organization as the National Health Service, it looks as if this is, you know, just the ideal way to really bring about fundamental change.
No, it's not just with Imperial College, I would say, that we are working in at the moment. Imperial, of course, is a neighbor, and we have a lot of history between, as we were formed at the same time.
Sure.
Imperial College itself, 1907, I was a graduate from Imperial. We have joint courses with Imperial as well, and we have students that graduate and go into the Imperial Business Accelerator, and their students come and join RCA graduates in ours as well. So there's very tight links there. Now, we also have people like Lord Darcy, who both at Imperial and also a great supporter of the Royal College. And a number of projects that I've experienced over the last 50 years. Now that sounds amazing, isn't it? But when I was a student in 1973, the very first project I worked with was on chairs for young children with spina bifida. So wheelchair design. And I went down to Carshalton Hospital in Sutton and Carshalton Hospital, which was the Centre for Spina Bifida, because already for 10 years previously, the Royal College of Art had been working with that hospital and medics from Imperial on trying to optimize new forms of therapy for those children. Now, when you have that degree of history, the institutions are, I think, deeply woven together, and woven together at a level where it's individuals don't have to wait for a vice chancellors to get together, or the very senior faculty of the institutions. We've got so many threads that run across. Now, with the NHS, you cannot solve the NHS issues technologically. They need to be solved both with management and understanding patients. And I think whether it's with Imperial or any other institutions, that's what NHSX, its digital arm, is looking for. And that's the group that we work with in the most depth. And in fact, we've just won a knowledge transfer partnership with the NHS to look at healthcare delivery and about how to create new digital services that are satisfactory for doctors to want to use by designing it with them and with healthcare professionals. And I think that's the kind of focus, coming back to this interdisciplinary, open and participative model of innovation that is de facto emerging, but we have to champion it. Because if people slip back into their old silos of doing things, then we will not have those holistic solutions. It's fine to be in your silo if you're adding one extra feature on Microsoft version 38.2, but it's not very good if you're trying to go and address these kind of complex systemic issues that are often characterized as wicked problems, where you need the disciplines to work together.
Yeah, no, I would just comment as well that I think something you said earlier, talk about agility, and all companies, and it's great that you are dealing with so many companies, individuals, need to derive competitive advantage, and that only ever arises from individual people. And I think one thing that pleases me and gives me some comfort for the future is that young people tend to be more, see things with the wide angle goggles on as to the now problems of energy and the global situation that we've all got to address, as well as that particular business opportunity. So to engage with those people and get their disciplines as multifaceted as we can, it's got to be hugely beneficial. Yeah. John, you'd like to come in? No.
Thanks, Tom. I just thought you'd like to know, and because there's no other person on here from the Education Committee, is that they're looking at this whole issue as well. And we're going to have, there's a potential visit, I think the date is already agreed, to go to NMIT in Hereford, which is based on the Olin College model of and very much about a multidisciplinary approach to university education. And Nick, I think it would be great if you could join us on that, because we're really looking at that. And there are a couple of colleges in London apparently that are setting up the same way. And these take in students that they can have qualifications, but they're not necessary. It's very much based on the Olin College model in New York, who are delivering some of these top designers in the States as well. I mean, there are other places as well, I know. So I think we need some direction a bit here about how we can support these sort of initiatives. And we've got very limited amount of money, but if we can support them or even bring the players together. I'm not, I'm nobody anymore, but Alan Hughes is there as underwarden. Maybe could take some of these ideas forward. But I think I would like to see founders doing what they can to bring about these sort of changes.
One of the things that I think is really impressive is if we can take some of our students or graduates that have created these enterprises, because I'm deeply conscious of the fact that I am the age of the my grandchildren are in their teens now.
Don't worry, I'm older than you.
But it just means that if you can have them relate to somebody that's in their 20s or 30s, then they can see what their future might look like. And I think that to be able to be shown how it can work can be very rewarding, both for our students and graduates to present their work often to groups like this. And we do this a lot in London, where we invite local communities in. So again, if there are some of the schools, and again, I've been enjoyed being on part of the education committee. I would be very eager to kind of open up the doors of the Royal College and not have me pontificate, but have some of our students just present and talk about their work. I know that's for the local schools that we are involved with today. It's very powerful.
Well, we're built. I've forgotten you on the education committee. Forgive me, Nick, but we've got AJ Sharma who's joined us from SetNet, and his boss is wanting to join the company as well, very much with the view that we can bring people into the hall or send people out to schools. And it strikes me your students are the ideal people to go into these places and share what they can do. And that's how I got to know AJ many years ago, that I made all my new graduates at the Rutherford Lab spend half a day a month going into schools. And we won all sorts of prizes as a result of it, because they absolutely, as you say, they are the people who can really enthuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think would be terrific to do as well, and again, the 1851 has been very helpful, is to make much more of the content that we create on these new methodologies, tools, and models absolutely all available open source. We've done a lot of that with the Empathetic Engineer. So if you type in empatheticengineer.org, not empathic, but empatheticengineer.org, you will find the website, all the tools there, all the templates, everything's downloadable, thanks to the 1851. And we're going to do a similar thing, I hope, with the new courses, which are all about interdisciplinarity, sustainability. They cover sustainability, society, technology, and business. And all those 4 new courses, I'm hoping we will be able to make similarly open source, available to all, whether you're at school, at university, or in business. Help yourself.
Yeah, no, that's exciting.
I'm very keen that we should invite the new Secretary John from the 1851 to some event at the hall. I tried to do it earlier, but Nigel was still in post for 2 days or something. But I don't know if people know about the 1851, but if you don't, do look it up. Just put in the Royal Commission for 1851 into your search engine, and you'll be amazed that it's very much in line with what Nick has been talking about.
Yeah, thank you. I think Alan, we could think about NMIT. I know you and I have talked about it in the part of the visit that only happened online in the end, but I think now we've had this conversation, perhaps we can look at who might like to come along and make a bigger group of people that would get this connectivity back to routes.
There were just 3 of us, weren't there, Tom, online?
Sadly, yeah.
And it posed more questions than answers. And I consider a visit is not only desirable, it's necessary.
Yeah, and I think that from what we've just discussed, let's open our minds up to who might really benefit, and it would be good to be involved in that. Obviously, Nick, but just think about it. Let's think about it offline and think how we might do that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
Any more questions or
actually,
comments? Go ahead.
I have a question for Nick. Fascinating talk. You started by referring to the 60-year cycle.
Yeah.
It would seem that we are, by my crude calculations, it's like a sine wave, the way you described it.
Exactly.
And it seems to me that we're pretty much close to the peak, aren't we, of this 60-year cycle. So presumably in the next few years, we'll be going off peak. Is that how you see it?
No, it's not really. It's just that it takes on average about from the time the technologies emerged to mass adoption between 25 and 30 years. I've got a friend who tells me it's 28.2. But I just think that there are reasons for this. It's just that capital follows smart thinking, and it goes into those new areas, and then it milks the profits from it during that era. And cultural change, we still change at roughly the same rate. So what you're going to see is the burgeoning of artificial intelligence. You'll see the burgeoning and exploitation at scale of robotics, in all kinds of different domains. So all these technologies, we're in the kind of, this is the moment of, if you like, their emergence, whilst people then try and figure out what on earth to do with it, and so that's the kind of the cycle. And
so it's like a bedding down process.
I'm sorry,
it's like a bedding down process.
Yes, exactly. And it's been written by a number of different, it was Kondratiev was an economist that worked for Stalin, and Karl Marx had said about that capitalism would destroy itself and that these waves would eventually all peter out, it was that, and in many ways in the 1930s, the recovery of the economy was a great disappointment to Stalin. But when he came back with his analysis and said, I've analyzed it, and actually each wave it gets stronger, he was shot. So, and of course, then Joseph Schumpeter kind of took over these waves of creative destruction and said they were kind of getting faster and faster, but I'm not convinced about the speed getting faster, but there are other academics who would say they are moving off a 60 to a 40 or 50 cycle, and that there are interim cycles, but I don't know. I'm sticking with my 60, 1760 Industrial Revolution, 1830 canals, 1830 steam engines and trains, 1890s, electricity and telephone. And I think to me, it just seems the way it is. And I'm going through the last one of my life.
I think Mark, would you like to come in, please?
Could I just say very quickly, because the space race is actually working in that 60-year cycle, isn't it? Because we're going back to the moon and Mars 50 years on from the first moon landing.
Exactly. And if you look up Kondratiev, it's Kondratiev with a K to begin with.
Yeah, well, I think it is fascinating, the time cycles of the things. But personally, I think the cycle times are accelerating, whether we like it or not. Not hugely. I think the biggest drag tends to be humanity, our culture, the generation by generation. The actual technology is going at in my humble opinion, faster than ever. We've got to be smart enough to keep hold of it. Yeah.
And that's why it's just so important, this interdisciplinary approach that takes creative and very human-centered and value-centric approach. Because if you have the technology but don't know how to use it, Cedric Price wrote in 1966, if technology is the answer, what was the question?
I like it. Yeah, you're definitely giving us food for thought, Nick. Any more questions for Nick while we're all assembled? Are we all?
Just to thank Nick for a wonderful talk. As usual, Nick, you're always inspirational. You don't probably know that Nick is also an artist as well.
Well, no, that's precisely what I was going to say. Thank you, John, because Nick, I can't thank you enough. I think it was extraordinarily broad in the concept, but so relevant to everything that we know. And I know, because I've had private conversation with you several times now, it's always a delight and it's always interesting and there's always things to learn. And aren't we all in the same boat in this massively accelerating technological world with all the complexity that's going on? So I think, honestly, I think you're at the leading edge of some of the clever ideas in Innovative Commons that we've got to grab hold of collectively now. So thank you very much. I can't say thank you much. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed it as much as I have. And I look forward to seeing everyone very soon. Now,
well, thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very
Tom.
much.
You don't mind if we broadcast it, do you, Nick? Because we normally record. Well, we have recorded it, but
Yes,
you're happy that we should.
I don't think there's anything in my talk today that I feel inhibited about going public with either. So do share it.
No, well, that's very kind of you, because that was very helpful too. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to say good evening to everyone. We'll see you.
Right.
Mark, I've just sent you an email you might like to look at.
Okay, will do. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.